Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Thanks very much for dropping in. Good to see you all. Today I thought I'd do something different and actually focus on a graphic novel today instead of a Funko Pop. It's one I've been after for quite a while and I managed to get it the other month from eBay. It's a great title and it is Batman and Captain America, which was published back in 1997. Like I said, I've been after it a while. I think that's not rare, but I think it is sought after. So I'm very grateful for having it. So I thought I'd share it with you today. Hope you're all doing well. And if you do like this video, please like and subscribe. It's very much appreciated. I'd like to see you all doing more videos as well. Okay, so I'm going to get to it. So this particular book, it is a favourite of mine. Mainly because it's a crossover. I gotta be honest, I am a sucker for them. I love the whole idea of heroes from a different universe or property meeting up with other heroes from a different universe again, such as DC meeting up with Marvel. I love that kind of stuff. I know it's not always canon, but it is a favourite of mine. I think it's just an exciting thing. And I think a lot of fans out there like it as well. When it comes to comic books. So yeah, I mean, this one, it is a crossover. It has elements from two different intellectual properties, which I think is kind of obvious, but just to state it for the camera, it is DC and Marvel. Now this particular story was actually published under the DC Elseworlds label. Now Elseworlds was a publication imprint which featured stories which fell outside of the main continuity or canon for DC. Now, this was an interesting idea because it actually allowed writers more creative space for their stories. So, as you can imagine, with the main continuity, if you've got stories or storylines are established, writers, when they come along in the future, they have to make sure they take that into account when writing continuation stories for the character. Now, with imprints and labels such as Elseworlds, that means that they have the power, more or less, to shape their own iteration of the character. So for example, not only have you got this Batman and Captain America, but you've also got things such as Batman Gotham by Gaslight. Now, I believe that was the first ever Elseworlds story. Really good one. I really want to get it. I've read up about it. Sounds really fascinating. And that's essentially taking a look at Batman from the late 1800s. So a Victorian era Gotham City. And I believe the villain in that was actually Jack the Ripper. So quite interesting story. But not going to go into detail on that one. Because, like I said, I'd love to get it one day. And if I do, maybe I'll do a video. Who knows? But yes, like I said, with this particular crossover, it is similar to earlier crossovers between DC and Marvel. Now, they have experimented with before, so you've had the likes of Superman versus The Amazing Spider-Man, which came out in 1976. Now, in those kind of stories, as is the case with the one we're talking about today, it's in a reality where it establishes that both Marvel and DC heroes actually coexist in the same universe. So, for example, in the Superman one, you've got Superman, who I believe he travels to New York, and he meets the Spider-Man there. Likewise, with this story that we're looking at today, you've got Batman of Gotham City and Captain America, who is actually fighting the good fight for the Allies in World War II. So similar, I find it quite interesting that, you know, it's a case of they just happen to coexist. No explanation is given as to why, although mind you, I don't think you can give an explanation for that. Kind of ruins the story, but I like it all the same. Now, stories like the Superman one, for example, especially during that time period, according to DC Wiki on the fandom, and as generally accepted knowledge as well, as is the case with DC books on the multiverse, stories like these take place in a reality known as Crossover Earth. because, as you can imagine, you've got DC crossing over with Marvel. Now, this story that we're talking about is actually different from that, because even though it is a crossover between the two companies, it doesn't take place on crossover Earth. It actually is established that the story takes place in a reality known as Earth 3839. And this particular title, Batman and Captain America, is in fact the very first appearance of this reality. Now, this reality is quite an interesting one, actually. I think it's quite unique. In this story, or in this reality, I should say, sorry, Batman and Superman start their careers in the late 1930s, very similar to the golden age of comics, with the very first appearance of both heroes. Now, but in this one, as the heroes get older, they have children of their own with their respective partners, and the children themselves actually take up the mantle of Batman and Superman. And it passes down the ages and so on and so forth into the far future. Now, this reality appears again in stories entitled Superman and Batman Generations. And as you can imagine, it's entitled as such because of the children and the title being passed down. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail about that, mainly because that's more explored within that actual title, those particular graphic novels. With this one we're looking at today, it doesn't really go into any detail at all, in fact, about that reality. But it has been established that this Batman that appears in this reality is the Batman of Earth 3839, and the same one that appears in the Superman and Batman Generations titles. Right then, well, let's get to the story, shall we? I mean, I don't want to keep you guys waiting for too long, and I don't want to make this video too long either. So let's get down to the synopsis of the story. Now, the story itself takes place in 1945, which, as for many of you probably know, was the final year of the conflict known as World War II, or the Second World War. As you already probably know from history books and school and all that, it was a conflict that started in 1939 all the way through to 1945 and claimed the lives of tens and tens of millions of people, both civilians and people in the armed forces. It was a truly horrific conflict and is notorious for horrific events that took place, such as the Holocaust. Now, this conflict, exactly as it says in the name, was a globe-spanning conflict. You had fights in the European theatre, so France, Germany, Italy, and then you had fights over in the Pacific theatre, which is, you could say the Japanese islands and other Pacific islands as well, Singapore, places like that. There were also conflicts on the African front as well, which did filter in and lead into the invasion of Sicily and Italy. But like I said, this isn't a history lesson, so I'm not going to go into too much on that. But like I said, it was a big conflict. Now, in this story, you have both Batman and Captain America involved. You have Batman on the home front, keeping Gotham City safe. And then you have Captain America, who's fighting the good fight on the front lines. Now, this particular story, like I said, it starts off in January 1945 and first takes place in Gotham, with Batman doing his run-of-the-mill night for him. He's actually chasing the Joker down in his Batmobile. Awesome. Joker manages to get away because, well, he's that kind of guy, always up to his old tricks. He manages to get away from the Dark Knight. Now, the story flashes forward then to the American theatre, where we follow, I do apologise, it actually flashes forward to the European theatre, where we follow Captain America, who is actually fighting a Nazi machine. He then gets orders to come back to the homeland, the United States of America, and his mission is to track down people who are trying to sabotage the Gotham City project. Now, I quite like the name. I think it's actually called Gotham Project, to be fair, but it is meant to be related to the real life project known as the Manhattan Project. Now, in the real world, our world, just to be specific, the Manhattan Project gave rise to the development of America's first atomic bomb, which, as you probably know from history lessons, 2 bombs were dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and those 2 events, if you like, led to the final surrender of Japan, the Imperial Japanese forces, which by extension actually ended the conflict around the world. Now, I quite like in this story how they've renamed it the Gotham Project, but it is hinted it's the same thing. So, in this story, I'm not going to go into too much detail because I don't want to spoil it for you guys. I mean, I don't think I'm going to do it any justice, no pun intended, in just reading and telling you exactly what happens. I think it's better if you read it for yourself. I mean, please get it if you do get the chance. It is a good read. So, right back into it, shall we? So, as you can imagine with these kind of crossovers, both heroes are starting on different sides, and then inevitably they come into contact with each other. Now, I like how in their first meeting, they are both in their secret identities, Batman and Captain America respectively, and they actually team up and they kick some ass. It is amazing. It's so cool. Sorry, the fanboys coming out with me. It was really good. Anyway, they kicked ass, they saved the plane, and gave the debriefing, and then went on their merry separate ways. Now, inevitably, they were going to encounter each other again, but in their day-to-day civilian identities. So Bruce Wayne and Steve Rogers. Now, neither one knew who they were, or who the other one was, I should say, sorry. Until, as is typical for many crossover stories, they come into conflict with each other and then realise they're on the same team, they're both the good guys, so they start working together to solve this mystery, i.e. who is trying to sabotage this project and stop them from causing any more harm. Now, it will be revealed later on in the story that 2 antagonists, who arguably are 2 of the most famous antagonists for either one of the heroes, appear in the story, and that is the Joker, as we mentioned before, but also the Red Skull. Now, as you all know, Joker is the nemesis of Batman, the arch villain, if you like, and then Captain America's arch villain, nemesis, is the Red Skull. Now, it turns out that they are actually working together, although, quite hilariously, it does actually turn out that the Joker wasn't aware he was helping the Red Skull to begin with, and actually tries to stop him from succeeding. Now, long story short, in a twist that is very similar to the mainstream comics for Marvel, Captain Rogers actually ends up being frozen. Dropping into water, gets frozen, and doesn't get discovered for quite some time. Now, as you all know, in the mainstream comics, Steve Rogers, the main canonical Captain America, has a similar fate. He drops into water, freezes, and is rediscovered years later, and he feels out of time because the world has moved on without him and is advancing technology and other ideals. Now, this happens at the end of the story as well, where, Batman, maybe not Bruce Wayne, but I wouldn't say too much, rescues Captain America and brings him back in the 1960s. So I think there's quite a nice touch to that. I mean, the story itself, like I said, I don't want to go into it too much. You can read the synopsis elsewhere, but it is a really good, enjoyable read to have if you've got the time. Now, I have read the story all the way through, and I gotta be honest, it is a really good book. I really enjoyed it. It is a throwback to the golden age of comics, which I do like. I mean, what I mean by that is the story itself is serious. It has got a serious backdrop to it, i.e. it is happening during the days of World War II. People do die in the story, and the whole point of the mission for the Red Skull is to actually drop atomic weapons on Allied nations, thus trying to succeed for the Third Reich and win the war for Nazi Germany. But despite that, it does have a lighter tone to the story, which is very reminiscent of the stories from, say, the late 30s and 1940s for Batman, where, you know, is a bit more light-hearted. He calls people chum, and, you know, it's meant to be more like patriotic Batman compared to the darker, grittier Dark Knight that we all know and love today. And I do love the team up between Batman and Captain America. I mean, both are very similar in terms of fighting prowess and abilities. I mean, they don't have superpowers per se. They both rely on their willpower, training, and determination to get the job done. Now, in this story, like I said, because it's set in the earlier days, this Batman is patriotic, as is obviously Captain America, which he has to be with that title. And they both work really well together. And the rivalry, the very short-lived rivalry between Bruce Wayne and Steve Rogers is really good as well. And is actually important because that rivalry actually helps both men discover who each other are and their secret identities. And plus, to top it off, you then have Robin and Bucky, who are the sidekicks for Batman and Captain America respectively. They have a little rivalry going on, saying that their mentor is better than the other. But when they do actually team up with each other, they actually end up admiring the other mentor. Now, I do like the story, and I'm very glad I have it. I suppose the only criticism I have is I wish it was longer. I understand it is a one-shot comic. It's not intended to be a series, but I do wish it was just a little bit longer, just to flesh out the story a bit more, especially towards the end when it jumps from 1945 to the 60s. I wish there was a bit of a longer period of time there. But you know, it is a good story nonetheless. I really do wish this crossover was revisited, and I wish they did explore the possibility of there being other Marvel characters in this reality. I mean, if, for example, if you've got Captain America sharing the same universe as Batman and Robin, who's to say that there isn't a Spider-Man, or there isn't another Marvel superhero who originated from the 1940s, like Namor, for example. But, I mean, it is a good story. My understanding is this is the only appearance of this particular version of Captain America, which I think is a shame, to be honest, because especially towards the end, it would have been nice to see him team up with Batman again, especially in the 60s. It would have been a great team up. And, you know, as many people may know, I believe that the Avengers themselves, a famous Marvel superhero team, their first appearance in comics was from the 1960s. So it would have tied in nicely with perhaps this Captain America, this particular version, meeting other heroes from the Marvel properties and forming Avengers. And then perhaps meeting this reality's Justice League. I mean, how epic that would have been. Justice League and the Avengers teaming up in the same universe fighting crime. I mean, that would probably, well, let's just say probably all the problems would be solved. Crime probably would have been, you know, rid throughout the world. There'll be no such problems as that. But hey-ho, anyway, thank you for listening, guys. I do appreciate you listening to me prattle on. Like I said, with these videos, I don't want to go into absolutely every finite detail, because one, I think it takes away the fun of the story, and two, I think it's better if you find out this information for yourself as well, like I have. I mean, like I said, I don't read a lot of comics myself. I do have quite a few graphic novels. I'm not always up to date with what's happening in the comic book world, but I do read up about it and I find it very fascinating. And it's something I love, which is why I'm making these videos. Same with Funko Pops. Absolutely love them. Can't get enough of them. FYI, I hope or wish that they did a Funko Pop based on this graphic novel. How you distinguish them from other Batman and Captain America ones, I don't know, but I'm sure there is a way. On a side note, there is something I do really like about this story, which I forgot to mention before. It is actually this reality's Joker. Now, he is shown to be just as homicidal and manic as the Joker we all know and love today, but, and I find this hilarious, he is actually patriotic. Like I said, when he actually carries out the plot, he believes he's just working for some other person, a nobody, but he's going to get money. When he finds out that his partner in crime is in fact the Red Skull, a Nazi who is trying to defeat America and the other allied nations, like Britain and France, for example, he actually turns coat and tries to stop him, and actually mentions that he is an American patriot, which I find absolutely bizarre when you think of the Joker that we all know today from various different realities. I mean, for them, it probably wouldn't matter if they were working with a Nazi. To be honest, they probably would relish it. You know, I just find it bizarre that this one, he's got no qualms of killing American people, but doesn't actually want to help a Nazi kill American people. Bizarre. But anyway, that's it from me, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Like I said, if you do like it, please like and subscribe. I hope you're all keeping safe and well, especially in these days with COVID and all sorts going on. So please stay safe, stay well, enjoy yourselves, and I look forward to seeing you guys soon. Alright, all the best. Bye.